Thank you, Saval, for that thoughtful and also inspiring perspective to start our this morning. I also really like this new words. I'm not sure whether it's new. It's new to me. The affordable economy. What? Okay, all right. Affordable autonomy economy. This is AAE, right? So it's important, and it's an ecosystem. It's not a single technology. We have to really look at this from a systematic perspective. So we now turn to our Facet Chat, a conversation that get one of the central challenge of our time. So how do we align government, industry, and innovation to deploy AI-driven solutions that actually make our transportation systems safer? So to lead this conversation, I'm delighted to welcome someone who has navigated that challenge from every vantage point. As administrator at the Federal Highway Administration, as COO of ITS America, as executive director of Minnesota's Connected and Automated Vehicle Program at Minnesota DOT, and now as a transportation industry executive at Google. So please welcome my friend Kirstin White back to my Minnesota time. She's the head of transportation strategy and partnership at the Google Public Sector. So Kirstin will introduce her panelists and get us started. Thank you.
Well, good morning, colleagues and friends. All right, okay, we have the best of all worlds today. My name is Kristin, as Henry mentioned. Henry didn't mention I come from the better M state, Minnesota. I'm sorry. I have to say that joke every year, friends. I would like to go ahead and welcome my colleagues and good friends in this space to join me. First, we're going to welcome back Ms. Saval Oz, our Undersecretary for Transportation. And what we're going to do is invite her and Greg and Connor to come join us, and then I have a question for them to introduce themselves. As Saval comes to the stage, many of you already know Greg Brunner, the Chief Operations Officer of Michigan DOT, which back, Greg, when we were in Minnesota, Minnesota was competing with Michigan for the title of the most innovative DOT. And sometimes we would lose out to you. I'm sorry. And I also want to welcome Mr. Connor Peltz. Thank you for joining us. Connor is an innovation leader at the City of Detroit, where he is the head of special projects at the Detroit Office of Mobility. So what I'm going to do as I join them in sitting down for just a moment is I'm going to invite the three of you to first start off, and we're going to start with you, Saval, and go down. I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves, but I want to introduce us a little different way. Saval, you reminded us, and for us, that this is all about connections. And so what I want to do for an introduction is, Saval, I'd love to learn a little bit about why you're in the transportation world and how you came to be the Undersecretary of Transportation for Research. If we can get microphones to work, let's just double check that.
There we go. Hi.
There we go.
Hi, Kristin. Thank you very much. I came into transportation because, to me, one of my form factors of fear is not being able to move. I think about getting up in the morning and what would happen if I couldn't get out of bed, if I couldn't get to the kitchen, if I couldn't go to the bathroom. So movement to me is like oxygen. It's like, it's a utility, by the way, that I believe we should all probably be paying just like we pay for a utility or a water, heating, gas bill. So I think it should be at some point a subscription that we choose to take, and there would be different ways in which we can calibrate that, but that's why I came to transportation. I also find it is a very, very exciting science, and there's only one accredited university in the country that offers this as an undergraduate degree, so we got to step up on that. And I think that's something that we all need to talk about here in our own conversations. And the last question I'll answer is, how did I come here? I think by popular vote. I have no idea. I mean, I've just been in the industry since 2010, and people know me for the work that I do and for the maybe the inspiration and motivation I have. And I think the DOT just decided that maybe President Trump just decided that they needed someone like that that could muscle in a seat at the table. So yeah, I'm here.
Or a tornado, right, as we heard
Yes, that's
earlier.
right.
Greg, I would love for you to also share your transportation story, why you're here and how you got to be the COO of a brilliant DOT.
Sure. Well, my interest in transportation started when I was really young. I was probably 2 or 3 years old. My favorite day of the week was I'd sit outside in our driveway and watch the garbage man go by and wave at him. So from those days, I wanted to be a garbage man was my goal. But again, that involves transportation in terms of where we're going. And kind of since then, I learned that I wasn't really the best writer or speaker or those kinds of things. I was good at math, so engineering is where it's at for me. And I remember going through college, I was kind of debating between civil and mechanical, electrical. One of my friends worked for one of the big three for an internship. I asked him what he did that summer. He said, I worked on a trunk latch. I'm like, oh yeah, what else you do? I'm like, I just worked on a truck latch. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. So then I kind of got into civil engineering to be able to go outside, do different things, and make a difference day to day. And really, while I've been at the department, I've been in quite a few different roles. I'm kind of the jack of all trades and master of none. But safety is what really caught my attention. I've seen lots of horrible things happen to people, being out at crash sites and other types of things. So at the end of the day, where it is I want to make a difference. When I retire, I want to be able to say I've saved lives, I made a difference. So that's really why I got into transportation.
Sounds like it aligns us. And I have to say, Greg, you and I now have a connection because my 5-year-old nephew, Lauren, also is into garbage and recycling trucks, and that's what he thinks I do for a living, that I drive a recycling truck, so we have an alignment. Connor, you represent the local view. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So even though I have a local perspective, I don't actually come from directly the city of Detroit, and honestly, my story is a bit unextraordinary, and I grew up in the suburbs. It's a pain getting around without a car, and so really the drive, pun not intended, the drive for me to get into transportation wasn't just the ability to find solutions to get around my own community, but also a background in alternative energy and understanding how to reduce emissions whilst providing some of those solutions is the biggest reason and position that I stand on.
Thanks for sharing that, Connor. And as we go into our first question, I would love to maybe start with you, because if you haven't noticed, friends, they actually kind of align themselves as local, state, and federal. I love how that worked. And that's kind of what our first question is around. Saval, you noted in your keynote that we have a really distributed governance model, right? We have 52 states and territories, we have 500 MPOs, we have 30,000 cities across the country. That's really hard, as you noted, to share all that data, to collaborate and connect towards this future you envision. I would love just to ask each of you, what do you see as the local role, the state role, and the federal role? Some of you hinted at it, but Connor, could you share your vision for each role of government?
Yeah, so I would say that local government is here to honestly help facilitate those deployments and, in a sense, really act as a testing bed, not of course like generally on the public, but really be able to facilitate new and emerging technologies, especially as it comes to AI, and especially AI in its physical form with automated vehicles. As we kind of move up the chain, I would say that serving as that test bed and being able to kind of connect a wire mesh between cities and understanding best practices for testing for the state, it provides a level of information to guide that regulatory process. And moving further from that, at a federal level, the federal government, they provide capital in order for us, other governmental entities, to continue that testing, provide pilots, and understanding how these emerging technologies and industries fit into our local economies, not to just grow our independence for developing and researching these technologies, but furthermore to actually understand how we can upskill our current workforce. And that's from the local perspective, because at a federal level, if we are setting the guidelines, we want to build things from the ground up, not from the top down. That sends a message that the actual people are guiding the process, not someone at the top who necessarily might not have an understanding of what is going on at that local level. So
I appreciate that. Innovation is local. That's a great perspective. Greg, you serve all kinds of localities and the state. What's your perspective?
Well, I'll go the opposite way, from the federal down to the local level. I think really at the federal level, it just comes down to establishing some sort of framework for lots of things tied to AI in terms of data data quality, interoperability, privacy, and cybersecurity, those types of things. Just kind of an overall framework, not really down in the weeds too far, but setting the stage for the rest of the states and regional areas to kind of follow and develop things that are a little more statewide or local specific going forward. At the state level, I think it's more about implementing an overall statewide system to be able to roll out so those things kind of happen throughout the state as a whole and then down to the regional level. As Conrad mentioned, really focusing on a lot of innovation. They know the clients or their customers' needs overall, so that's where you can really make a lot of those innovative changes going forward. Because at the end of the day, when you start looking at things, unfortunately, mobility doesn't end at jurisdictional boundaries. It kind of goes throughout the United States, so we need to have some sort of alignment overall, but everywhere's a little bit different, but as long as we're going the same way, that makes that interoperability a lot better.
To know that I don't have to deconflict anything here because they're both right. I mean, I think all driving is local, right? So local sets the stage for gathering of the data, understanding the signage, the lane markings, the road furniture, right? And then as we start to build now into the state category, state is about protecting the systems, ensuring that we have understanding of the data systems, ensuring that we have standards that are getting out latency, refreshing the data, all that information, and also road traffic management system. I think federal government is sort of like in the hands of a declaration of innovation, right? Creating a strategic element of what are our priorities and our agenda that we should be focusing on. And I think that as we look at what this administration is working on, it's really about connecting the states into a federated framework. I did not say federal, I said federated framework, a lightweight mesh network that we can work with industry and local and state governments to ensure that we have that interoperability, an approach towards common standards, a common data exchange, so we do have the national capability of connecting the dots across the country.
A declaration of innovation. That's your 11th patent now. I love that. That's fantastic.
You're just coming out today.
Okay, Saval, I'm going to take a little bit of our background commonality as either Googlers or former Googlers. And one of the things I learned in the past year is a concept that I want to frame into the next part of the conversation. So what I learned in this past year is this concept of Martech's law. Has anyone heard about this ideology? So it's this concept that as technology, artificial intelligence evolves exponentially, arguably now every 6 months, our public agencies only evolve logarithmically, right? So, Saval, you're wearing the Triskelion pin, which shows the different modes, right? Ports were founded 400 years ago, right? Our highway departments were founded 100 years ago to procure and install concrete and pavement. They weren't really designed for the conversations we're having today with autonomous vehicles and connectivity and AI. So my question to each of you is this: how can we create cultures of innovation in every level of government you just noted that helps de-risk innovation, that you can innovate procurement to do what we need to do faster and even just manage data better? It's a complex question, but I think our thought leaders can answer it for us.
Well, I'll take one of those elements, which is workforce, right? I mean, we're really looking now at a way in which used to be that you entered into the federal government and you were a lifer, right? You were there for the rest of your life and your career. Well, how do you innovate and how do you change and how do you keep up with new AI technology when much of that has been developed on the native side with our youth? So one of the things we're doing with Scott Kapoor and others in PPO is we're trying to establish partnerships with schools to encourage the youth coming out of these areas of science to consider a 1 to 2 year stint at the U.S. government, specifically at the Department of Transportation, Energy, Information, DARPA. There's so many agencies which, if you could learn how government works, then you're released into the free world and you can actually build industry with the knowledge of how the U.S. government works. So it's a bit of a sort of a flywheel that's substantially different from, I think, the way we're set up right now. So I'll just take that one and I'll hand it off to you, Greg.
No, and I think you're right. We need to create a culture of innovation, and a lot of that starts with the leadership in different departments or cities or elsewhere to allow for those innovations to happen. I think it's easy for us to get stuck in what we sometimes call checkbox engineering, where people just know what the process is, they follow it, and keep moving forward without really thinking big picture or how things are going to change or evolve. Kind of looking forward. So enabling folks, to think outside of the box, take calculated risks on things to keep us moving forward, but just to allow that to happen and at the end of the day, we have to start really thinking big in terms of what we're doing, but acting small and continuing to move fast to continue to roll out these innovations.
Checkbox engineering, Greg, that's a new one. Okay, I had to write that down. Connor?
Yeah, and I completely agree with the both of my fellow panelists here. Honestly, it starts with workforce, and moving back down into youth, it's all about how we introduce them into these emerging technologies. At the City of Detroit, we are, wanting with this new administration to really make some historical movement with our youth and getting them involved in these emerging industries. And what does that look like? Well, it involves those direct partnerships with schools and universities. It involves something as simple as, a local office such as mine partnering with another department to create some type of summer camp program, which I'm alluding to that's happening this summer, that we're literally getting K through 12 students to take tours of our innovation hubs at Michigan Central and New Lab to get a hands-on experience and understand that is what I can do when I'm older. I'm able to go ahead and work in this mobility and emerging technology industry as it relates to AI. And they're not just able to touch and feel it, but in these instances, they're able to understand how it works because they see all of the parts that go together. So.
Sounds like we all need to come back here in the summer, Connor, and participate in this Youth Institute. I love that. And Saval, before we get into the next question, this is related. I love how you talk about, can we just underline the thought leadership you have to bring people from government into private sector? And conversely, I was at Berkeley's ITS event last fall, and I asked the opposite question. To the industry folks, I asked, which ones of you would quit your job and go into the government? And all the hands lowered. And I think we need to foster that culture, your flywheel example, don't you think? And so maybe let's start with you again. What do you think is one thing industry needs to be doing better to accelerate your vision for the autonomy economy? And what is one thing government needs to do better?
Yeah, I think industry is already doing it, right? They're setting the stage for what we should be working towards. Many of these areas of sophisticated technological advancements that we're seeing, the pilots and all, are already doing it. And a lot of them, I call it well, it's kind of like the PayPal mafia, but it's from Google, right? Because they're all of my colleagues there are now having, they're really successful in what they've been doing because they've been persistent about it, and they've been operating under extremely difficult circumstances, right? Now we have the opportunity to build a federal framework around that, and that is something we should be doing. So when people say thank you for your service, it's actually a good expression because it does take an army of thought leadership and persistency at the table and sometimes sharp elbows to want to push forward in an environment where people are, as you pointed out a minute ago, thought to think incrementally. It's that mindset of thinking incrementally, coming to work and getting it done versus really trying to set the objectives. And AI is going to do that for us. Because a point on that is that what AI is going to do is it's going to remove the barriers to entry as it levels the water level on many companies that don't need to have all of the back-end perception technology, knowledge of road signage, because a lot of this is already going to be sophisticatedly embedded in the chipset, and then you're going to have the toolkit to be able to go out in there and implement. So it behooves us as the US government now to sit and really work out that federal framework, because without that, absent that, you're going to be at the political whim of people deciding things internally for other reasons, and that shouldn't happen.
Saval, what I hear you actually talk about is the idea of 10x innovation, which might be new for some of our audience members. Would you mind explaining kind of that philosophy that you've learned for a long time?
Well, at that point, it was the ability, when Google X was developed, it was developed as a concept of bringing engineering talent or an entrepreneurship, the schools, the people that were coming out of the DARPA challenges, the solar car teams, et cetera. And I believe some of the elements of mapping and certain vision capabilities that Google on the software side had developed. So that what do you call it, the trifecta effect was about making a 10% difference of impact?
10x, right?
10x impact. So everything was thinking about it. If it's too small, that it doesn't make that 10x impact, it's probably not worth doing it. And the other thing that I have to say, in all fairness, not to plug our alma mater of Google, but instead of spending money on Super Bowl commercials, we really invested that money back into the technology, and that was a really incredible environment to be able to work with people that cared so much about what they were doing and improving and getting those goals accomplished that it was more important than sort of brand recognition.
Yeah, I guess when I think about what industry can do to help us out, I think really needs to focus on interoperability. I get approached almost every day by software solutions. They say the buzzword AI, that they're doing something fancy, and I start talking to them, and it's really, this is a standalone solution. At MDOT, we have over 190 different software systems that we use on a daily basis. A lot of those talk to each other, a lot don't, but I think for us to be able to move forward, we need some more open systems where they can all talk to each other. To use that data, collect it once, and then use it everywhere through data warehousing, other types of things, but we need that interoperability factor from lots of the software providers out there to make that happen. Rather than just one system, once that contract expires, we have to do something else to move forward. So I think on the industry side, that's one big help for us would be focusing on interoperability. I think kind of within the department or at our level, it's more on change management for our staff. We do lots of different IT solutions, and where we always seem to run into hiccups is people don't want to change their old business processes to meet new software solutions that are out there. What we're in the process of doing at MDOT is actually hiring on the IT side a change management professional to come in to help us through those processes going forward so that we can remain successful and keep looking forward.
Greg, I love that. And one of the things we actually talked about at TRB this year is that Change Management 101 is telling the reason why the change is needed, which Michigan is not new to, right?
Yep. Oh, we always ask the why, so we always explain that as we're rolling new things out. That became a new term with us, is explain the why.
Love it. Hunter?
Yep, so definitely agree with interoperability. That's a huge thing that doesn't need to just happen, of course, at the state level, but definitely at the local level as well. And I want to take that a step further and say that I think that even though the industry is definitely leading on numerous things when it comes to innovative practices, one of the things they could do just a little bit better is transparency. I think I find a lot of the time as government, especially as local government, a lot of what happens is we are pitched something or we purchase something, and it's that sentiment of what you order versus what you get is not the same. And so I think that being more realistic about the capabilities of products that are being sold and developed realistically would just be a bit better for everyone all around. And then honestly, like, dovetailing from that to go to the government side, what we can do better. Our processes are a bit slow. Government is so inherently bloated.
I thought it was just us.
Right, no surprise there. But I think that we could just honestly, instead of trying to create multiple layers, there needs to be a way to actually streamline these innovative practices and emerging technologies. And I just want to make one plug really quickly for that. The way that the city of Detroit is doing that is through our Transportation Innovation Zone. It's a special designated area in ordinance where new and emerging mobility technologies can come along and pilot those in real world environments. Of course, getting the actual approval of the city and requiring a permit and whatnot, but it's just one of the many ways that we can actually move forward as government entities to push innovation in an effective way.
Friends, how many conversations do you hear us talking about change management and accelerating innovation in government? Like, I really applaud the leadership here on this dais. And one thing that I really want to actually call out too is that I think it shows the partnership between private sector and government and how all of you are working and building that together. So maybe next year you'll show us some of these examples in action about government industry acceleration. On that note, Henry noted that we have now been convening this conversation for 9 years, and CCAT is going to next year have a decade anniversary, whatever that's called. So we'll have a birthday party. And so one of the things that I know many of you are at all of these conferences, and sometimes we even ask the same questions or have the same conversation. So I'm asking you 2 questions. One is, what is one thing you'd really like to see us build on next year? Like, if you're on this stage in this fireside chat next year, what do you wish we would have actually accomplished? And so, related to that, what is one thing you wish we'd just stop talking about and just take action? Any one of you want to go first?
I think I'll say one thing. There's a lot of buzz around it right now. It's an important industry, but I would like to move past the drone conversation It's incredibly important, of course, but I think that when we focus too long on one thing, you know, we need to share the spotlight a little bit, is what I'm saying. And I'm saying that because the state has just come out with a maritime strategy, not to steal your thunder there, but I think that these types of emerging industries are ones that we can really focus on. You know, bringing back shipbuilding is one of the things that the state would like to focus on, and the city of Detroit wants to be part of that. But in short, sharing the spotlight.
And is it almost kind of like sometimes we need to really think more multimodal rather than just focusing on one modal innovation? Is that a part of it?
Absolutely, and there can be, of course, one, you know, shining star amongst the emerging technologies that you know, are focused on for like 1 year or so, but a lot of capital and a lot of funds are going towards, you know, drones right now specifically, and I would like to just see the wealth shared a bit.
Thanks for that. Craig?
I think one thing we need to talk more about would be just data quality overall. I know when we start talking about AI or other things, it's all about the outputs or potentials, but it's one of those things with garbage in, garbage out. One of the efforts we're going through in Michigan at MDOT is actually a data warehousing and information standards exercise to kind of look at all our data that we have, see what isn't maybe the best quality and where we can do to combine that into one source of data. So just, I know that's not, when you start talking about AI, data quality is not sexy. It's not the unicorn and rainbows that come out at the end, but without that, you know, nothing's going to work going forward. I think the one thing we need to kind of stop talking about and start acting on is interoperability. I know I already talked about that previously, but I think that's where we really need a big push.
It may not be sexy, but it's one of the most important things, right?
Yep.
Yeah, appreciate that.
So I endorse both of your comments, but I also want to say that we have this kind of project called the Corridors Project. I don't know if you've heard about that, but that's part of the autonomy economy cycle. We are trying to get point to point from Long Beach to Jacksonville, incorporating state to state, you know, comms basically, and identification through four or five different priorities. One is lane closures. In other words, one's EMC, and identifying 4 of the topical issues, which we have already identified. We have our Constitutional Congress of 13 states, because those are the 13 most progressive ones that wanted to participate. I'm happy to say Michigan is one of them. We're pairing those states up across borders. So their first application is actually to be able to get messages across. So to your point of interoperability, it's not our role to create those standards. I almost want those standards to be self-certified so you all can come up with best practices on latency, refreshing data to meet those 4 different priorities of what those corridors would do. And maybe if we're lucky, we do a challenge, right, that comes out of this, because the best way to get people focused in the right direction towards open source, towards data interoperability, towards best practices on data, structured, unstructured, supervised, unsupervised, is really to challenge people to get a mission done. So a year from now, I'm hoping I'll be able to report that we've actually successfully completed 1 or 2 of those trajectories of operation.
I love that. You heard it here at CCAT. So we have 2 more questions before we open up to question and answer. And I'm going to ask each of you to maybe share something as we continue the conversation today in panels, breakouts, networking. What is one thing that you would like folks to be talking about or thinking about? Maybe it's not something that we've talked about yet. Maybe it is just doubling down on something you've shared today. What is one thing you want to be a focus of conversation for the rest of the day? Connor has his eyes wide open, friends. He's like, please don't start with me. Anyone can go first.
So my immediate thought goes to, you know, drawing back to one of my experiences with a recent project with our accessibility project and automated vehicles at the city of Detroit. And I really want people to think about vulnerable populations and people with disabilities in conversations throughout the rest of the day and how it relates to automated vehicles and just general AI technology. I think that understanding how that technology can fit into everyone's day-to-day life, and not just a normal able-bodied person, it's beneficial not just for everyone, but also for those who are developing the product. It's, I guess going back to Greg's interoperability point, it's that, but in a more human form.
Thank you, Connor. Greg?
And I guess one thing to start thinking about is, how do we move from strictly doing pilots around to full implementation? I know at the department we do lots and lots of pilots. Some of those stay pilots for years and years and years. We're looking at kind of a lot of those pilots we're doing. When do we decide, give it the green light, yes, this is something we need to expand and implement, across the state going forward, or where do we kind of cut bait on some of these and let them go, say we did the pilot, this is what we learned, and move on. So again, looking at really expanding a lot of those pilots, or if they aren't working out, kind of lessons learned and keep moving forward.
I think both of those are really serious points. And then the point I guess I'll add to that is embed. Just embed your research capability, your activity, whatever the structure or form factor is, there really is the need to bring research to actual implementation. So if it's marine-based, somehow figure out a way to get into some of the MARAD conversation. A lot of money and CapEx is being thrown in that direction right now. There's great opportunities with respect to drones. There's at least 6 different UTC projects that are working on similar form factors and payloads. Communicate. There's some great opportunities we saw with strategically enabling the swarm airspace for that to come to reality, and now they're working with government agencies. So embed with a great partner in industry, with one in state or local or federal government, and just really start to put together the framework of what this looks like in the real world. Because if you wait too long, research becomes obsolete like anything else.
That's what I guess I had one more to add to that too. I think it was the first question we talked about the multiple layers of government. As you're going through these conferences, whether it's here or anywhere else, feel free to share best practices. I think as an industry I don't think we do enough of that. Best practices, lessons learned, incorporate those into your daily conversations that you're having, even if it's getting coffee here or anywhere else, just to share, what we've learned as a whole.
And I think on that note, as we conclude, that's something that I've learned too, Greg, is in the public sector, we're too afraid of talking about our failures, but if you just call them lessons learned, that's how we grow together, right? And as Sival and I know, and those in the private sector, we talk about, failing fast, and I think all of us just want to fail forward. So on that note, and Sival, you kind of started this in your keynote, 2 years from now, it's 2028, we're 2 years out from this particular symposium. What have we done, and what does that future look like?
I don't want to have to think about how to get to where I'm going, right? I just want my clock to strike and my on-demand service to be there, and I got to get ready and get out the door. I just don't I think it should be second nature. It should be frictionless. It should be, seamless in terms of payment. I don't have to worry about, traffic or anything. It's already predisposed in terms of how long it's going to take me to get to the office, when I'm going to pick my child up, all of that. I just think we live in an environment where right now we really need to lean in to start to build on that demand curve. I do want to say one point very quickly about supply chain and about best practices. There are many great UTCs, VTTI, for example. They're building these supply chain best practices, good housekeeping, capabilities on who are the great suppliers for some of the, traffic management systems, components, et cetera. We have a move towards buy and build in America. Please start thinking about maybe working cross, leadership in your UTCs and encourage you all to build on that. So we have some sort of a good housekeeping stamped book that says, these are the ones that do really well, and we've had good experience. So I just wanted to comment on Greg's point.
And since you talked a little bit about the external things, I was thinking more internally tied to workforce. I want them to be embracing this new technologies that can kind of alleviate a lot of their monotonous day-to-day tasks, which aren't necessarily the highlight of their days. I think I saw a stat out there that...
Are you talking about dog fooding?
Yes. I've seen a stat that people spend 30 to 40% of their work days just looking for information. If we can streamline that process, just think how much more productive we could be, where people are not focused on the monotonous tasks they do, but the things they really enjoy. What can they do to move the needle going forward is going to be reliant on a lot of this technology and them kind of embracing that going forward. And I'll let you explain dog fooding, because I probably have a different example.
Dog fooding basically means eating your own shit. right? So, I mean, before you want to sell or do anything with the public, general public, you want to do it yourselves. And when we actually stood up that bus, I had to explain to the secretary what dog fooding meant. And it meant basically we getting in the bus as a DOT first to make sure that it leveled up to our level of safety requirements. So that's what dog fooding is.
Beta testing, to Connor's point, so that when you're buying something, it actually works. Connor, your thoughts?
So what I'd like to see in the next 2 years is just like generally, at least part of the city of Detroit, I want to see people feeling more safe, being able to get to their normal commute. I also want to see a bit more of that seamlessness that Saval is mentioning. Having more seamlessness in a city and your day-to-day commute and getting to wherever you need to, it's one less thing to worry about, and a little bit more extra brain power to focus on actually providing thoughtful solutioning. So.
Thoughtful solutions all around, sir. Thank you for that. So we, colleagues, have a few minutes for questions. You have 3 bold leaders on this stage that are willing to answer your questions. There are 2 microphones. Calvin is at that one. There's this one as well. Please come down, stand up, walk down, if you are able. And what we're going to ask you to do is introduce yourself and then just have one question and we'll ask it to the panel. I see someone back down there as well. So we've got at least 2 questions.
Okay.
Welcome.
Hi, thanks for having us. My name is Gus Nunez. I'm with iTerrace out of California. And this question is more directed to Saval. We've been talking about autonomous vehicle for a long time. I'm sorry, connected vehicle for a long time, right? I mean, 20 plus years. I know there's been a lot of standard discussions and changes, et cetera, but when do you see or will USD provide a timeline for mandates to drive that initiative for mass adoption?
Yeah, I mean,
Thank you.
it's a $10,000 or $10 million question, right? Unfortunately, I don't control the regulatory side of rulemaking, but I am doing full court press. My team's doing full court press to ensure federal highways and its OSTR work really closely together so we can establish the safety denominator, right? Because that safety denominator is really important, that it comes from an objective base, and that is one of the most critical things that we're expecting from academia, because industry can hold court on a lot of different safety. And Google's, by the way, done some great job, as has Aurora, as has some other companies on establishing, and as well as Dr. Henry Liu's effort on near misses and hard braking, et cetera. But avoiding collisions altogether is a different denominator, and we need to establish that. So all the work that's being done by you all is extremely important to force feeding that material up so that those rules can be made. Hopefully this is going to get done during my time at the DOT. That's why I'm there. It's not easy because we have to keep in mind safety first, as I said, innovation always. But we can be a force multiplier as we get the safety parameters locked in so people feel comfortable that they're making the right decisions. And as you know, FMVSS is in their own structure. So that is something where we have to just make sure that we keep full court pressure on, maybe move to a man-to-man defense if we have to.
I also think it's important to remind ourselves that Saval's team is still actively implementing the V2X deployment plan. And so the auto manufacturers are incorporating those technologies, but it takes on average, as we know, those of us in Detroit and Motor City Land, it takes on average 5 to 7 years to envelop those technologies in a vehicle, and the average lifespan of a vehicle in the United States is 12 years old. So it's going to be a turnover, but not without the leadership of Michigan, who was the original innovator of connected vehicle technologies. I see another brave soul back there with a question. Please, welcome, introduce yourself.
Thank you. Shao Li from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and it's great that I learned quite a few great terms like affordable autonomy, economy. Actually, I think this is very important for the success of autonomous vehicles, not only in urban areas, but also for rural and tribal areas where the economy means more important and actually which usually doesn't have as much attractivity to the private vendors. So we know actually these autonomous vehicles, when they developed, are very expensive, and I know over these years the cost dropped, and right now it seems like if you look at Waymo versus Uber and Lyft, the price is slightly higher or comparable. So what is your prediction of the trajectory of the cost structures? So like in 5 years or I don't know 10 years, how's that cost going to turn to be? I'm just curious about it, and how's that, because that's very relevant to the penetration of this technology and scalability of it. Thanks.
I will offer an industry perspective on that. I think a lot of us are holding a little device in our hands called a cell phone. When I got my first iPhone, and yes, I work for Google and I own an Apple product, it's legal still. They were quite expensive, right, colleagues? Just like the first LiDAR sensor was $200,000. We can now buy them for less than $10,000. Over time, you know, the cost supply structure with capitalism allows things to decrease in price. And so that's at least what we're thinking and strategically planning for on the Google side of the house. But any other thoughts?
Also, it's a piece price, right? It's an experiential curve. So it's a mathematical equation, right? Determined by, you know, piece quantity. So as we start thinking about how we aggregate demand, not just on the components and subcomponents, but also on the existing requirements for the road systems, RSUs, et cetera, we start to now really reduce the price of this infrastructure and the interfaces required on these vehicles. So it really does, it's sort of like a feedback mechanism for the quantity of demand. And that's one of the reasons why we talked earlier about, can we get the states together to work on, when they do their demand forecasting, to maybe get their orientation compiled with maybe 2 or 3 other states. So they're creating a demand cycle that actually reduces those piece prices in effect. So maybe my colleagues want to add something.
One thing that I will say is, again, drawing back to like one of our projects at the City of Detroit, is we did actually a bit of analysis on the cost versus benefit, of course, of autonomous vehicles versus having actual drivers. And of course, there are so many different variables, but at the end of the day, like in the year period that we had this pilot, you know, it really comes down to demand as well as the cost, the operating cost of these services. And we're just going to have to see how that plays out when it comes to actually scaling everything. Waymo is doing a great job right now, coming to city and successfully deploying. But I would ultimately say that we see that curve going down, you know, cost per ride for the actual patron that is using this service for automated services. We just haven't gotten the threshold yet, at least at the city level, to say that we have kind of dipped below and autonomous vehicles are cheaper to use. Not yet, approaching.
So friends, thank you so much. We have talked wide-ranging conversation, everything from garbage trucks to tornadoes to the autonomy economy and accelerating innovation and change management. Can you please put your hands together and thank Connor, Greg, and Saval for joining us here today? We're going to hand it back to you all, but before we hand it all, I do also want to have you put your hands together for 3 more individuals, Henry, Debbie, and Calvin, who have put us all together and convened all of this today. Thank you, CCAT. Henry and Calvin, we'll hand it back to you all. Enjoy the rest of your day.